reading today is from John 2, verses 1 through 11. If you'd like to follow along, it's on page 863 in your Pew Bible. The wedding of Cana. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it had came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him.
I'm glad you chuckled at that little part about people being drunk, because today's sermon message is going to be a little different. Some of you who have been here before know about what you're about to experience. Some of you who are visiting with us or are here for the first time have not heard one of these. As I said, it's not your typical sermon. I'll tell you a story. The story takes place in a little town called Rock Haven, Maine. And don't go looking in the long atlas for it. You won't find it. You won't find it on your Google GPS on your phone or your app. It doesn't exist there. It exists up here, which is a scary place to be sometimes. But there's a cast of characters that live in this little town of Rock Haven and attend the old First Church on the Common. And so we're going to go back there today. It's been a strange start to the summer over in Rock Haven, Maine, and old First Church on the Common. It started out cool in April, and then May came along and it was warm and dry. It was so dry that the wood started to dry up, and even the garden plots started to dry up, and people were concerned that they planted their seeds in the dust. Then the calendar page turned from May to June. And it was as if God had remembered some forgotten sin of our community and let loose with a daily deluges, the like of which even Noah would have complained. It was during weeks like these that thoughts turned to better days, drier days, sunnier days. And so by the end of the second week, Reverend Williams was sitting in his office and he was reminiscing of such cheerier days. And these brought to mind the event of last summer. It was April of last year when they first showed up in church. Yeah, actually it was the Sunday after Easter. You know, the Sunday that pastors refer to as Low Sunday. Because, you know, after the highs of Easter, everybody's somewhere else. But they showed up on the Sunday after Easter. Bernie Dixon, at his usual place as usher and greeter on the steps of the church, noticed this young couple with 2 children. They parked on the common and they were coming across the green up around the old Minuteman statue, and he thought, oh, they're just going over to Helen's Diner to get some breakfast this morning. But he was quite surprised when they turned at the Minuteman statue and made their way across the sidewalk that led up to the front steps of Old First Church. Bernie welcomed them in the usual manner, giving careful consideration as to where he might invite them to sit. Now, if you've ever been a greeter or an usher, or if you ever visited a church that you've never been to before, you know how awkward it can be to walk into a church and find a pew that someone else is not claiming. So as he thought about it, Bertie said, well, certainly I can't sit them in the third pew back on the pulpit side next to the window. That's where Ruth and Howard Williams, that's their pew. And even though the call to worship is about to begin and the pew is still empty, they're often late. And even if they don't show up, next Sunday, they will be able to tell when someone's sitting in their pew. Bertie gave us some more thoughts. I said, I know. I will sit there with Jeanette Holman. She would like the company and wouldn't necessarily hound them with the usual stranger, excuse me, first-time guest interrogation method that Sam Coleridge would use. No, Sam, where are you from? What do you do? How long have you worked there? And if you could figure out a way to squeeze it in, you say, how much do you make? He's on the stewardship committee. Well, they and their two children sat with Jeanette that first Sunday, and lo and behold, they showed up the next week. Only this time, they had two different children with them. Well, you can imagine the scuttlebutt. And that was enough. That the couple's unexpected and unexplained presence for 2 weeks in a row was the conversational diversion that the community needed. For you see, for the last 2 or 3 weeks, poor Carl Holgram of Holgram's Bakery had been the center of the community's gossip central. Ever since he ordered a new sign, he ordered a new banner for the bakery, but he did it on these online banner stores. Well, Betsy isn't so sure, but Carl swears that he spelled it correctly when he filled the form out. That it was with an R and not an N. But the banner, when it came in big 12-inch bright red letters over the top of the Holgram's Bakery store, advertising their new line of freshly baked party buns, said in bold letters, "Fresh buns for your panties." Trouble is, Carl didn't notice it, and nobody would tell him till it was up for a week. Well, it was obvious that while this couple didn't have much in the way of material blessings, they had been blessed with love. And so no one knew exactly when, but at some point, this wonderful young married couple became one of the Old First Church family. I'm not sure whether it was when Beth started slipping the children lifesavers during worship, or when the children felt comfortable enough to come forward with Banta McIntyre and Bobby Flanagan and the others for the children's message. Or was it the Sunday they chose to sit in the unclaimed pew behind Jeanette? How and whenever it happened, they soon became Sunday regulars. Well, Reverend Williams was sitting in his office one evening and he heard a soft knock on the door. It was this young couple. He invited them in, and they made small talk. And finally, the young fellow very nervously asked the question that he was there for. It turns out that Jerome Jordan and Leslie Strong were not married, and they were wondering if Reverend Williams would consider marrying them. The question didn't come easy for them. You see, they were both rather shy, but they'd been to other churches, and other pastors around town had already turned them away because they'd both been divorced. Still, if they could, they wanted to get married in a church. But unfortunately, they didn't have the money to even pay for the use of the church sanctuary for their ceremony. Something simple, Jerome explained. And Leslie said, yes, no fuss, no party, just no money. Just the required witnesses and the children will be enough, Pastor. So Reverend Williams suggested that maybe they have the ceremony outside in the Clarice May Bradley Stemple Memorial Garden on the north side of the church. And this seemed to be agreeable, so they set the date for Saturday, the 14th of July. Well, around about a week before the wedding, Abby, the newly hired but very part-time church secretary, just happened to mention to her grandmother, who happens to be Imogene Reynolds. And now you know Imogene, those of you who have heard these stories before, of something about this lovely little wedding ceremony that she had typed. Well, that's all it took. Imogene had a hold of it, and she wasn't going to let it go. By noon the following day, 2/3 of Old First membership knew about this clandestine wedding, and what was this all about? Who was hiding what? Why the big secret? The council hadn't been informed of any wedding, and why hadn't the church fellowship luncheon committee been notified? What was the pastor up to? And then finally, it came out that this young married couple that they thought was married were actually the ones getting married. Well. It wasn't until Abby told Grandma Imogene the whole story about the young couple's circumstances that Imogene began to rethink matters. So the next day, Imogene runs into Jeanette Holman at Harry's IGA market, and she sets the scheming with Jeanette. And Imogene is pleasantly surprised to see a side of Jeanette shining through that most others have not seen. Leaving the IGA, Imogene happens upon Bertie Dixon just coming out of Joe's barber shop. "Bertie," Imogene calls to him across the way, "there's to be a wedding at the church a week from Saturday, and we are going to have a reception. You do what needs to be done in order to have the church hall in order." And off she trots, leaving Bertie stunned but smiling. He has been conscripted into one of Imogene Reynolds' schemes before. Well, that Sunday, and throughout the week, Reverend Williams kept running across members of his flock, gathered in small circles, talking, planning, and scheming. Were they that upset over this wedding? Should he be packing his bags? He first spoke to Sam Coleridge about his concern, and he was shocked that Sam was clueless. But he would get to the bottom of it, not to worry, Reverend. As near as he could tell, Imogene Reynolds seemed to be at the center of it all. So Reverend Williams mustered up his courage and gave Imogene a call. "Imogene, is there something I need to know about? Have I done something?" he anxiously inquired. "Reverend," Imogene began, "everything isn't about you. We're planning a little something in the fellowship hall this Saturday. You just keep that couple outside until after the ceremony, and then you see that they come into the parish hall after it's over. Think you can handle that?" Imogene is a woman who shoots straight from the hip. Well, the 14th of July came. It was one of those midsummer days of our childhood memories. Warm, sunny, the afternoon sky filled with those huge popcorn clouds. Reflecting back on it, Reverend still comments how it was one of those wonderfully simple but completely satisfying moments that are all too infrequent in parish ministry. The wedding was beautiful. Jerome had a new shirt and pants, even wore a tie. Leslie was wearing a pretty summer dress. And the 4 children were bright and cheery. The altar was 2 cherry trees. The music was provided by a pair of cardinals singing away in a burning bush. The dragonflies danced around the bride as they ushered her across the lawn. Witnessing the splendid affair were butterflies and sparrows and finches. In attendance were black-eyed Susans, Shasta daisies, and various members of the Lily family. Upon the close of the ceremony, after the blessing and the kiss, Reverend Williams, seeing the high sign of Imogene through the parish hall window, invites the newly married couple to come into his office to sign the marriage license. Well, as Jerome and Leslie Jordan, as husband and wife, stepped into the hall, a ceiling full of balloons cascades down over them. And from behind the balloons, there are here shouts and whistles and calls of congratulations. And there behind the punch bowl is Imogene Reynolds and her sister Beth. Jeanette Holman and Bee Stearns are in the kitchen. Jeanette's sliding the last tray of deviled eggs through the serving window. Bertie Dixon is over in the one corner putting away the netting and the rope which had held the balloons in place. Jed Carlisle is at one table, sipping on a cup of coffee, and so is Mabel Bailey. Sarah McIntyre and her grandson, little Banda, Banda sitting on Joe the barber's lap. Betsy and Carl are putting up the last of the party sandwiches on the table. The Flanagan family is gathered at another table, little Bobby looking healthy and hungry. Clara French is there, Abby Reynolds, Bob Barstow, Jake Bradley, Lucille McDonald. Seems all of Old First Church is there. Even Sam Coleridge. And as usual, he's already helping himself to the buffet. And of course, just coming in the door, fashionably late, Ruth and Howard Williams. At one point during the afternoon, Reverend Pastor Williams leans into the kitchen to thank the ladies for all that they had done and their thoughtfulness. Oh, as Jeanette Holman says, it was no fuss. You know, they're family. And besides, piped in Imogene as she filled another one of the church's vintage crystal punch cups. All weddings should have a party, shouldn't they, Reverend? And it seems to me, if you recall, that even Jesus enjoyed a good wedding reception. So it is. Rock Haven, Maine. Old First Church.